I've been married to Sophia for a decade. 10 years of what I thought was a life built together, for better or worse. Or at least, that's what I thought. To be honest, our marriage always felt like it was running on autopilot. It wasn't bad, just predictable. But recently, I started to see things shift. Little things at first, almost imperceptible. But over time, they grew, like cracks in a windshield. Once I noticed, it was impossible to ignore. It started with her appearance. Sophia was never one to obsess over fashion or fitness. She wasn't lazy, just comfortable in her own skin. The kind of woman who'd spend Saturdays in yoga pants and oversized sweaters, watching crime dramas all day. So when she suddenly started revamping her wardrobe, I couldn't help but notice. She started wearing tighter dresses, ones that clung to her every curve, and her makeup became a lot more deliberate. Lipstick that was way too bold for a simple grocery run, if you asked me. Then came the gym. Sophia had never been into working out, but out of nowhere, she signed up for a membership. Suddenly, she was going 3 times a week, coming home drenched in sweat, looking all flushed and glowing. She told me it was for her health, but something about it didn't sit right. You spend 10 years with someone, and you get a feel for their little changes. And when those changes aren't about you, you start to wonder. So, I asked her once casually if everything was okay. She gave me one of those smiles, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and said she was just trying to take better care of herself. I nodded, but I could tell something was off. It felt rehearsed, like she had prepared that line in case I asked. Soon after, another name started popping up in our conversations. Ethan Britt. She mentioned him in passing, talking about the funny things he'd said, or how he'd recommended some book. Ethan was this young, smooth-talking marketing guy who'd recently joined her team. But the way she spoke about him, that was different. There was this spark in her voice that hadn't been there in ages. And every time I asked about him, she got evasive. Too evasive. I could feel something was wrong, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. Then came the late nights and the work meetings. At first, it was just once or twice, but before long, they started stretching into weekends. When I asked about them, she would roll her eyes and mutter something about deadlines. I wasn't buying it, but I didn't push yet. The excuses got thinner with every passing day. One night, Sophia came home later than usual, smelling like a perfume that wasn't hers. I didn't say anything, but the silence in the room felt thick, like it was waiting for something to explode. That's when I knew I needed to start paying closer attention. Then there was the phone. She started leaving it face down on the table. It was a small thing, but I noticed it right away. Sophia had never been the type to hide her phone like that. We used to be open about everything, sharing passwords for convenience. But now, the password had changed. When I asked her about it, she dismissed it, saying it was just a security update. The final straw came one night when Sophia left her phone unattended on the couch while she went to the bathroom. I knew I was crossing a line, but something in me couldn't resist. I grabbed her phone just enough to see the screen light up. And there it was, a message from Ethan. See you tomorrow. You're out of this world. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. My hands went cold, and my heart sank. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but something held me back. Jack's voice echoed in my head. Anger wouldn't get me anywhere without solid proof. Jack Hudson, an old friend and former private investigator, knows a thing or two about this kind of stuff. I met him for drinks that night, told him everything while nursing a beer. My grip so tight on the bottle, I thought it might shatter. You need to stay calm, Jack said, his voice steady and practical. Jumping the gun without evidence is just going to give her the upper hand. Be smart about this. His advice made sense, even though it pissed me off. All I wanted was to scream at Sophia, demand answers, maybe even make a scene. But Jack was right. Confronting her without evidence would make me look paranoid and insecure. So what do? I asked, feeling helpless. Jack leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Gather evidence. Watch the patterns. If she's cheating, you'll find out soon enough. I left the bar that night with a pit in my stomach. The weight of what was happening, and what might happen next, was overwhelming. I kept replaying the message from Ethan over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I lay there next to Sophia, who was fast asleep, breathing steadily as though nothing was wrong. I knew what I had to do next. This wasn't going to be a confrontation. It was going to be an investigation. And if what I feared was true, she wasn't just betraying me. She was destroying everything we had built together, piece by piece. And if that was the case, I was going to make sure she felt every ounce of pain she caused. After that night, something inside me changed. I wasn't going to sit around wondering anymore. I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I took Jack's advice and decided to gather proof before making any moves. If Sophia was cheating, she was going to regret every moment of it. The first step was getting into her phone. I found an app that could track her texts and locations without her knowing. It took some time and patience, but one night while she was in the shower, I managed to install it. My heart was racing the whole time, palms sweating, pulse pounding in my ears, but I got it done. Then I waited. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through emails while Sophia made coffee, completely unaware that every message she sent would now be in my hands. I watched her move around the kitchen, acting all innocent like nothing was wrong. It took everything I had not to snap and demand the truth right then and there. But no, Jack had told me to be patient, and I was going to be smart about this. It didn't take long before the messages started rolling in. Ethan can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? Soon. Winking face, can't wait either. I stared at the screen, feeling like I had been doused with ice water. There was no denying it now. She wasn't just staying late at the office. She was with Ethan. And it wasn't just work they were talking about. Over the next few days, I read their messages, each one more painful than the last. They talked about meeting up for drinks, sneaking away during work hours, and having lunch dates that were definitely more than just casual meals. Ethan's messages were filled with compliments that seemed designed to make her feel like she was 25 again. But the one that really hit me came late one night. Ethan texted, "I feel young again when I'm with you." That one word, young, hit me like a gut punch. I knew exactly what that meant. He made her feel something I couldn't give her anymore. Alive, excited, vibrant. The worst part? She replied with a heart emoji. That night, I lay beside her, but it felt like we were oceans apart. Her body was warm next to mine, but everything else was cold. I wanted to shake her awake, demand an explanation, confront her for everything she was doing behind my back. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I needed more. Then came the night that sealed it all. Sophia said she was going to visit a friend, some old coworker I didn't even know. I smiled and nodded, pretending to be the clueless husband, but as soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept a safe distance, making sure not to get caught. It wasn't long before I saw her pull into the parking lot of a nice little restaurant downtown. And there he was, Ethan, standing at the entrance, that smug grin on his face. Sophia practically floated into his arms, and they held hands like a couple of teenagers on their first date. I watched from the shadows as they sat down for dinner, their heads leaning in close, laughing and joking like the world was theirs. When they left, they didn't even bother saying goodbye at the curb. No, they climbed into a cab together and headed straight for a hotel. I followed them the whole way, my stomach in knots the entire time. I stood outside the hotel, staring at the revolving doors, knowing exactly what was about to happen. I could have stormed in, made a scene, dragged her out by the arm, and humiliated her in front of Ethan and everyone else in that hotel. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around and walked back to my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel all the way home. I wasn't ready for the confrontation. Not yet. There was still something I needed to do. A couple of days later, I showed up at her office with lunch, but I wasn't really there for Sophia. I was there for Maya Drake. Maya was another marketing specialist, someone who had always seemed to resent Sophia's success. I figured if anyone knew about the affair, it was Maya, and she didn't disappoint. The moment I mentioned Ethan's name, I saw Maya's face change. She leaned back in her chair with a smug little smile. "Oh, so you know about them?" she asked, almost as if she were amused. "It's not exactly a secret around here." My stomach dropped. "So everyone knows?" I asked, barely able to hide my frustration. She just shrugged. "They're not exactly subtle. I've seen them sneaking around together more times than I can count. Honestly, I'm surprised you didn't know sooner." I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. But I hated the way she looked at me, like I was just another fool who had been blindsided. Then she leaned forward, her smile turning more conspiratorial. "If you're looking to get back at her, I can help with that." Her words hung in the air, thick with meaning. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. But then, a thought crossed my mind. If Sophia was capable of betraying me so easily, maybe it was time for me to fight fire with fire. I gave Maya a small, calculating smile. "Tell me more." And just like that, the first step of my plan was set in motion. Once Maya made her offer, I didn't hesitate. If Sophia wanted to play this game, then I was going to make sure she knew exactly what it felt like. Maya was more than willing to play her part. It wasn't love, not even lust. It was pure, unadulterated revenge. Mutual convenience, fueled by the need to hurt someone who deserved it. We started texting, and it escalated fast. She knew what I was after, and I knew what she wanted. This wasn't about a relationship. It was about making Sophia feel the consequences of her actions. The first time we met, I booked a room at a hotel across town. There was no hesitation on Maya's part. She showed up in a tight black dress, her perfume filling the air as she walked toward me like she owned the place. We didn't waste time talking. That night, I learned two things. Maya was just as angry at Sophia as I was, and she had no problem tearing everything down. After that, we met regularly, sometimes at her place, sometimes in my car, in parking lots where we wouldn't be recognized. But my favorite meeting spots were the ones that were right under Sophia's nose. At our house, I made sure to leave little signs behind. An earring forgotten on the couch, a wine glass left on the coffee table with a trace of lipstick on the rim, the faint scent of Maya's perfume lingering on the pillows. Subtle signs, just enough to make Sophia start wondering. I wanted her to feel the unease creeping in, to sense that things were starting to slip away from her. At first, she didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she was just pretending not to. Maybe she thought it was all in her head. But I could see the tension in her. She'd frown at the wine glass, or glance at the earring. Her expression would shift for a second, but then she'd force a smile. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. Meanwhile, things between Maya and me got bolder. I wasn't careful anymore, not like I had been with Sophia. We'd meet at the house during the day, knowing Sophia wouldn't be home. I made sure the sheets smelled like Maya's perfume. And when Sophia crawled into bed at night, it was twistedly satisfying to know she was lying in the aftermath of my betrayal, completely oblivious. But the real pleasure came from the questions I started asking her. Loaded, rhetorical ones that were designed to chip away at her calm. "How was your meeting with your friend tonight?" I'd ask, with a knowing smirk as she walked through the door. Tired from her supposed work outings, she'd stiffen, falter for a moment, but recover quickly. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she didn't say a word. "Fine," she'd say, her voice flat, giving nothing away. I'd hum in response, letting the silence linger just long enough for the weight of it to hang in the air. Then, I'd casually drop another line. "You know, I've been thinking it'd be nice if we spent more time together. Maybe a weekend getaway, just the two of us. Unless, of course, you've got too much going on with work." Her eyes would narrow, and I'd catch a flicker of irritation. She didn't like it, I could see that, but she never took the bait. Not yet. She'd brush it off, maybe laugh a little too loudly, or quickly steer the conversation elsewhere, pretending everything was fine. But I wasn't fooled. I could see the cracks forming in her perfectly curated world, and it felt good. Every time I left something of Maya's lying around, every pointed remark I made, I could feel the tension build, like tightening a noose a little more each time. Lying next to Sophia at night, the space between us seemed to grow more and more every day. It was as though we were strangers in the same bed, playing the roles of husband and wife without any of the connection that once held us together. She was physically there, but mentally, I knew where her mind was, probably with Ethan. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. My mind was on something else, something much more satisfying. I was plotting my next move. Maya, for her part, was loving every second of the mess we were making. "You think she suspects anything yet?" Maya asked one afternoon, her fingers tracing lazy lines down my chest as we lay entwined on the bed. "Oh, she suspects all right, I replied, giving her a grin. She just doesn't know what to do about it yet. Maya laughed, a low, almost predatory chuckle. Good. Let it drive her crazy. It was like a game, one that I was winning with each calculated move. I pushed Sophia further and further without ever tipping the scales too far. Not yet. I wasn't just betraying her. I was breaking her down, piece by piece, making sure every moment she spent in her comfortable little life, oblivious to the truth, felt like a silent betrayal. And the most satisfying part? Watching Sophia start to feel it. She wasn't dumb. She could sense something was off. She just didn't want to face it. The way I greeted her when she came home, too casual, too distant. The way I casually mentioned her meetings with friends, or brushed off her attempts at intimacy. I could see the doubt creeping in, like a shadow in her mind, and I could feel the satisfaction slowly building inside me. Bit by bit, she cracked. One night, we sat at the dinner table in tense silence. She put down her fork and looked at me, her expression hard to read. "Milo, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice measured, like she was walking on thin ice. I shrugged, not even looking at her. Why wouldn't it be? She hesitated, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of her napkin. I don't know. It's just, it feels like we've been off lately. Like there's this distance between us. I looked up at her then, offering a smile that was almost too calm. Maybe it's because you're always so busy with work. Her face tightened for a split second. Anger, guilt, or maybe a mix of both, before she forced a smile. You know how it is. Deadlines. Stress. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Yeah, deadlines. The silence that followed was thick, so thick you could almost feel it. It hung in the air, waiting for something to break. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the fear that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one hiding something. And I reveled in it. The tracking app had already confirmed it. Sophia and Ethan had planned another night together, a regular occurrence by now. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't just sitting back, waiting for the inevitable. Tonight was the night everything would come crashing down. I called Maya that afternoon, keeping my tone casual. You free tonight? Her laugh came quickly, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. For you? Always. What's the plan? I need you to come over, I said, keeping it simple. Get comfortable. We're going to leave a few mementos. Maya was all in. She didn't even hesitate, practically giddy with anticipation. She arrived around 8 p.m. in a dress that was far too bold for a quiet night in. We didn't waste time. A glass of wine in hand. We both knew exactly why we were there, and we didn't need to drag it out. The whole thing was mechanical, driven more by the need for revenge than any actual desire. Maya wasn't gentle, and neither was I. We fed off the anger and resentment, knowing that every second together was another reminder of what Sophia had done to me. The room filled with the scent of cheap wine, sweat, and perfume. Exactly what I wanted. Afterward, we stayed on the couch, sipping wine and talking in low voices like we were planning our next move. I grabbed my phone from the table and snapped a picture of us, tangled in each other. Her lipstick smeared across her face, my shirt half unbuttoned. It was the kind of picture that told a story all on its own, if I needed it to. Do you think she'll notice the lipstick on the glass? Maya asked, her fingers running through my hair. Oh, she'll notice, I replied with a grin. And if she doesn't, the earring on the couch will do the trick. Maya chuckled, clearly savoring the chaos we were about to unleash. You're a dangerous man, Milo. Only when I need to be. We stayed up late, carefully making sure the evidence was scattered just right. A wine glass with lipstick stains left casually on the coffee table. Maya's perfume lingering on the pillows. The sheets twisted from our time in bed. By the time we were finished, the house looked like a crime scene, and I wanted Sophia to see every bit of it. Maya left around 2 a.m., kissing me on the cheek before slipping out the door. Good luck, she whispered, her smile wicked. Text me when the fireworks start. I sat on the couch, sipping the last of my wine, waiting. I knew Sophia would be home soon, and I was ready. My heart raced, but it wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she saw everything I'd set in motion. Around 6 a.m., I heard the sound of keys turning in the lock. I stayed perfectly still, calm, watching as the door creaked open. Sophia stepped inside, looking tired but satisfied, probably still basking in the glow of her night with Ethan. But the moment she walked into the living room, she froze. Her eyes darted around, taking in the scattered evidence. Wine glasses, the smell of perfume that wasn't hers, the unmistakable signs of someone else's presence. I watched her face shift, first confusion, then realization, and finally, panic. "Milo," she started, her voice shaky, like she wasn't sure if she even wanted to ask. What's going on?" I leaned back on the couch, draping my arms lazily over the back, and gave her a slow, knowing smile. "What's the matter, Sophia? Something wrong?" Her eyes locked onto the earring, Maya's, sitting innocently on the armrest of the couch. She looked from the earring to the wine glasses, her breath catching in her throat. I could practically see the gears turning in her mind, trying to piece together a puzzle that had already been solved. She stepped closer, the scent of Maya's perfume hitting her like a slap across the face. Who was here?" she demanded, her voice trembling. I tilted my head, feigning a casual air. "Oh, just like how you've been meeting with your friend Ethan?" Her face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" I didn't need to say anything more. I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and pulled up the photo of Maya and me on the couch. I held it out to her, watching her expression shift from shock to disbelief, and finally to pure, unfiltered rage. "Now we're even," I said softly, savoring the weight of the words as they left my lips. Sophia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish caught on dry land, gasping for air, completely out of her depth. I could see the panic, the realization slowly setting in. And in that moment, I saw her for what she truly was. Someone who thought she could have it all. No consequences, no accountability. Finally, she found her voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. You cheated on me." I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "Yep, just like you've been cheating on me with Ethan." Her face twisted, a mixture of fury and hurt. "You bastard." I shrugged, unbothered. "Guess that makes two of us." She stood there, shaking with rage, her fists clenched by her sides. I could practically feel the heat radiating from her, the urge to scream, to lash out. But she was paralyzed by the weight of her own guilt. And that was the best part. She couldn't accuse me of anything without exposing herself. She knew she'd lost. I leaned back, completely at ease. "So, how was your night with Ethan? Good, I assume?" She glared at me, her chest heaving as she struggled to control her breathing. "You're a fucking monster," she hissed. I smiled and took another sip of wine. "Takes one to know one." She stormed off toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, but I just sat there, relaxed, satisfied. The game was over, and I'd won. The next morning, Sophia exploded, just like I knew she would. I was ready for it. She came out of the bedroom, her face stormy, eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. "You really think you can cheat on me and just get away with it?" she spat, standing in the living room like she was about to hurl something at me. I didn't flinch. I stayed right where I was, sitting on the couch, calm as stone. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and unlocked it. "Before you start throwing stones, Sophia, maybe take a look at this," I said, swiping through the screenshots of every flirtatious message she and Ethan had exchanged. There were enough heart emojis, secret rendezvous plans, and late-night texts to sink a marriage. And then I saved the best for last. A candid photo of Sophia and Ethan at the entrance of a hotel, her hand resting on his arm, both of them smiling like they were in love. I held the phone out to her. "Recognize these?" I asked, my voice even, steady. Her face went pale as she stared at the screen, her righteous anger dissolving into panic. I could see her eyes darting between me and the evidence, her mind racing to regain control, but she was too far gone. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, her words tumbling over each other as she tried to salvage some sense of denial. "Ethan and I. It's not serious. It was just—" I cut her off, raising my hand. Save it. I don't care what excuses you've got. The point is, you lied. You cheated. And I'm done hearing your excuses. I let the words hang in the air, heavy and final. So don't act like you're the victim here. Her jaw clenched, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. But there was no way out. She was out of cards to play, and she knew it. And then, just to seal her fate, Ethan did what I knew he would do. A few days later, I got the news that he'd cut things off with her completely. He was either too smart or too scared to let an affair derail his career. He ghosted her without even a goodbye. Sophia was left standing in the rubble of her own poor choices, and I wasn't about to clean up the mess for her. Once Ethan was out of the picture, I made my move. I wasn't going to waste another second playing house with a woman who had burned everything we'd built to the ground. I called a lawyer the very next morning and filed for divorce. This wasn't going to be a drawn-out ordeal. I hired the best lawyer I could find, someone ruthless, the kind of person who treats divorce like a battlefield. I wanted it over fast, and I wanted Sophia to feel every ounce of it. When I served her the papers, she tried to act blindsided. "You're really going to throw away 10 years of marriage over this?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned sadness. I met her gaze, hard and cold. "You already threw it away the moment you brought Ethan into our bed, whether literally or just in your mind." She didn't have much to say after that. The court hearing came quickly, which was fine with me. I was ready for this to be over. Sophia showed up with her lawyer, trying one last pathetic attempt to squeeze more alimony out of me. "He can afford more," she argued, glancing at the judge with teary eyes. "After all, he's the one who's been unfaithful." My lawyer didn't flinch. He stood up calmly, opened a folder, and laid out every piece of evidence I had collected. The texts, the photos, the hotel receipts, all of it. He presented it with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The judge flipped through the evidence, his face unreadable. Then he looked at Sophia, and for the first time, I saw it hit her. Really hit her. She had no leverage, no sob story to sway the court. Her lawyer whispered something to her, likely advising her to cut her losses. Sophia looked like she might cry, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She made her bed. Now she had to lie in it alone. The judge didn't waste any time. The prenup, the one Sophia had scoffed at all those years ago, held up without question. She'd get a modest settlement, just enough to cover the basics, but there would be no alimony. And with no kids, there wasn't anything else left to fight over. When the judge's gavel came down, it felt like the final page of a story I'd long since stopped caring about. I should have stopped reading it years ago. As we left the courtroom, Sophia reached out. One last desperate attempt to salvage something. Anything. From the wreckage of what we'd built. "Milo, we could fix this," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We could start over." I shook my head slowly. The finality of the moment pressed on me like a weight I'd been carrying for years, and now it was gone. "No, Sophia. You broke it, and I'm done trying to fix it." She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. I turned and walked away, not needing to hear her excuses anymore. I had nothing left to say to her. By the time I reached my car, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. It was done. All of it. The lies, the betrayal, the endless wondering about where she was when she wasn't home. Finished. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, just breathing. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally exhale. Sophia could deal with her own mess. I owed her nothing anymore. She made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Once the divorce was final, I knew I couldn't stay in the same town. The old house, the familiar places, it was all just a trap, a constant reminder of a life I wanted to forget. I needed to get away, to start fresh, somewhere the echoes of my past couldn't reach me. So, I sold the house, every inch of it, and set my sights on a new city. A clean slate, far from the life I used to know. Moving wasn't just about physical distance. It was about creating a new chapter, one I could write on my own terms. The old me, the one that had spent 10 years sacrificing for others, needed to be left behind. I had always dreamed of opening a cafe, but somewhere along the way, that dream had been pushed aside. Sophia never thought it was practical, and I let her convince me it wasn't worth the risk. But now, it was my turn. My dream. My decision. The first few months were tough, grueling even, but they were also exhilarating. I found a small space in a vibrant part of town, a perfect corner with huge windows that let in natural light. It was everything I wanted. I poured myself into the cafe, choosing the best beans, designing the menu, making it a place that felt like home. It became my obsession, filling the void where regret and anger used to sit. When the doors finally opened, I didn't know what to expect. But the cafe took off faster than I'd imagined. It wasn't just the coffee that drew people in, though it was good. It was the atmosphere, the sense of belonging. Locals came in for their morning coffee, and soon, the cafe became a place where everyone knew your name. A community built around something real. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that was truly mine. It wasn't just a job, it was freedom. Every decision, every step forward was mine to take. I was no longer tied to anyone's expectations but my own. I found joy in the little things. Chatting with regulars, testing new recipes, even staying late just to rearrange the furniture, simply because I could. And then I met Isabella. It was at an art event one weekend. I hadn't planned on going, but something told me I needed to get out of my own head. I was wandering through the exhibit when a woman next to me made a snarky comment about one of the paintings. Who in their right mind would pay $5,000 for something that looks like a toddler's finger painting? She said, laughing. I turned and saw her, Isabella Mason. She wasn't like the women I had known before. She wasn't trying too hard or putting on a show. She had a natural charm, a warm smile that made me feel at ease immediately. We started talking, and by the end of the evening, we had moved from the gallery to a nearby bar, swapping stories over drinks. There was something about her, something raw and genuine, that was completely different from anything I'd ever felt. After years of deception and manipulation, being around her felt like a breath of fresh air. We didn't rush anything. We took our time, meeting for coffee, going on walks, getting to know each other without pressure or pretense. She knew the basics of my past, and she never judged me for it. In fact, she admired the way I had turned my life around. "It's not just a business, is it?" she asked one night as we sat outside, watching the sunset. "It's a new life." I nodded, realizing how right she was. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Being with Isabella was easy, effortless, even. There were no games, no lies, just two people getting to know each other. We started talking about the future, about trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to explore. I shared my idea of opening another cafe, maybe even expanding someday. She smiled, teasing, "Why stop at one? You could open a whole chain." I laughed, "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But I liked the idea. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a possibility. As our relationship grew, I realized something. Isabella wasn't just someone to fill the void that Sophia left behind. She was someone I could build a life with, one based on trust, respect, and honesty. With her, I didn't need to carry the weight of my past. I wasn't bitter or angry about Sophia and Ethan. They were just a chapter in a book I had already finished. Now, I was writing a new story, one that was mine from the very first page. One evening, as Isabella and I sat on the beach, talking about our next adventure, it hit me. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was free. Free to live life on my own terms, free to love without fear, and free to leave the past behind. And that, I realized, was the best kind of revenge. Not holding on to anger or resentment. Not seeking payback, but simply living well.